Hi there, Thor owners. Today on our 2016 Thor Windsport, we're going to be installing Roadmaster's Rear Anti-Sway Bar. And this is what our sway bar is going to look like when it's installed. It's going to provide additional assistance to your existing sway bar. It doesn't replace it. It's actually added behind the axle to help it out. The sway bar itself is much larger in diameter than your existing sway bar, so it's going to provide much more assistance than your original one even did to begin with. The additional sway reduction that you're going to receive with this bar installed is going to make it much easier to maintain control of the vehicle. Because typically when you've got wind blowing on the side of your motorhome, it makes it rock back and forth. You hit uneven pavement, that also makes it rock back and forth. And if you've got any evasive maneuvers when you're turning, that can cause it to lean to one side. Well, this bar is going to flex and react to help pull the vehicle back to center at all times, helping to keep that straight line, which is going to cause less pull on the steering wheel for you when driving down the road. What this means for you is that you're going to have less fatigue when you get to your location, so you're going to be able to spend more time doing the things that you enjoy instead of being worn out from fighting your motorhome. The more control you have over your motorhome, the more confident you're going to feel driving it, and you're just going to have an overall safer experience driving your motorhome. This is also going to transfer to your passengers. The more stability that you're going to have on your motorhome is going to give them a more comfortable ride, as they're not going to be tossed around as much inside the motorhome. This as well will help reduce their fatigue from riding in the motorhome, so you'll all feel more rested and ready to have a good time when you get to your location. To get the most out of your suspension upgrades, you could also put a set of sumo springs in the front and rear, which will further help reduce sway and cushion your ride going down the road, further giving you more control over your motorhome and a better ride. And you can also get a steering stabilizer in the front, which will help keep your steering wheel centered so you're not fighting back and forth as much when hitting potholes and uneven pavement going down the road. With all those upgrades in place, your motorhome's at its maximum potential. We'll begin our installation at the rear of the vehicle, just above the rear wheels. We're going to do this on each side. In order to access these lower bolts here, you will need to drop down your rear leveling jacks and lift the vehicle up. Otherwise, your leaf spring is going to be in the way. After you've lifted it up using your leveling jacks, I recommend that you put some jack stands under it to support it in the event of a failure. We'll then use a 21mm socket to remove both bolts. We'll then take our frame brackets here. This is what they look like. They're both going to be the same on each side, so you can't mix them up. It's going to slide on the frame just like this, so it butts up against the frame on the bottom, as long as on the sides here. We'll slide our bolts that we just removed through our bracket, and then we're going to slide those through the frame. We'll use the nuts that were on the back side, like you see here, to re-secure those. These nuts are nice because they've got a weld plate on them that will contact the frame, so you don't need to put a wrench on it when tightening it or loosening it. And we can tighten them back down. Then torque your hardware to the specifications found in your instructions. Now we're underneath the vehicle. We'll be installing our sway bar plates here onto our existing U-bolts. Now, before you take all of your U-bolts loose to slide the plate on, you want to make sure that your axle's supported. So you can either have the vehicle on the ground completely when removing these, or if you want more room and you're using your leveling jacks to lift it up, to give you that extra room, you want to make sure you've got a jack stand underneath the axle to support it, to ensure that it doesn't drop down. And now we've got our vehicle on our lift that has the appropriate safety measures, and we're ready to take these loose. The first one that I take loose, I like to just thread it back on a few turns, because when we take off the rest of them, this plate down here is going to want to drop down. It's a pretty heavy plate and it needs to stay in place. We're removing all these nuts with a 1 1/8 inch socket. You want to keep in mind that these have an extremely high torque, So you'll want to look at your instructions to see the torque specs, and if you don't have the proper equipment, you may want to go to a professional to get this installed. Now that all of our bolts are loose, we've got just a couple that are hand threaded on there. We're going to grab our plate that is going to go on there. You want to make sure that the angled edge here with the point is pointing towards the rear of the vehicle and that the holes here are pointing towards the center. We can then remove the nuts that we have on there hand tight and slide our bracket on. Once you've got those slid on, you can just reinstall your nuts. And you can tighten those back down using a 1 1/8 inch socket. Want to make sure you go back and forth, tightening those down evenly. Then you can torque all of your hardware to the specifications found in your instructions. Once you finish doing this on one side, you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Next, we're going to install our hangers. Now do remember that everything we do on one side, we're going to do on the other side. We're going to place the bushing side of our hanger up into the bracket we already installed. Take the large bolt that comes in the kit, slide it from the outside in, and place a nut on the other side. We're just going to leave that loose for now, and we'll tighten our hardware down once we've completed getting the sway bar in place. Now we'll put our bushings in place. The bushings are split to make it easy to install. There's some lubricant that comes with our kit that we're going to use by spreading it around on the inside of our bushing here. Once you've spread it around the inside of the bushing, you can take the bushing and slide it around your sway bar. We're going to do that with the other bushing on the other side. We'll then take the caps, smear some lubricant inside them, and then place them over the bushings. We'll be lifting our sway bar into place momentarily, but since it's so heavy, I recommend that you prepare your hardware first. Take all the short bolts that come in the kit and slide washers on them. You'll have a total of 4 bolts with washers on them when you're done, 2 for each side. We'll now lift our sway bar into position. You're going to place one of your bolts down through the rearmost hole. Then take another washer and a nut, place it on the bottom of the bolt, and get it started. Once you've got one started on each side, it'll hold the sway bar up, making it easier to install the rest of your hardware. There are several holes in the side of your plate bracket here. You'll want to line up your cap bracket here with the hole that it lines up with and slide it down. And the hole we're using is the rearmost hole of the 2 that are towards the front of the vehicle. And then on the bottom of that, you're going to be placing a flat washer and a nut, just like we did with the other hardware. We can now lift our sway bar up, lining it up with our hanger brackets, slide another large bolt from the outside in, and place a nut on it. We'll then tighten down all of our hardware. We're going to start with our bushing brackets. We'll be using a 19mm socket and wrench to tighten those down. We'll be using an 18mm socket and a 16mm wrench to tighten these down. Then we'll tighten down our end link bolts using a 15mm socket and wrench. With these, you just want to tighten them down until it starts to squish the rubber, but you want to kind of stop there. You don't want to over tighten them. Then we can torque our hardware to the specifications found in our instructions. And that completes our installation of Roadmaster's Rear Anti-Sway Bar on our 2016 Thor Windsport.